Welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about how to adjust our privacy settings. Oftentimes in the world we live in, lots of things are public and very little is private. And so sometimes that mindset comes over to how we view healings from Jesus or how Jesus moves in our lives. And I believe today God is telling us that it's not about publicly being healed. Sometimes it's about accepting a healing and keeping it private. Our text today says in Mark 5:27 through about 30, when she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" The woman with the issue of blood has always been interesting to me since I was a child, because this story seems to be quick, but there's a lot of power here. And what I love is that she's dealing with a very sensitive and private issue, but she still goes to Jesus for healing. What I love is that in the process of her healing, she has a private conversation. Now, she doesn't go around telling everybody around her that she's going to go to Jesus for this private issue. She just makes her way to Jesus through a crowd. And what I love about that is that sometimes, yes, it's good to share information. Sometimes, yes, it's good to seek counsel on things. But sometimes for some issues that are sensitive, I love that we can go to Jesus and he can heal our situation. Now, what I love is that when she gets healed by Jesus, Jesus does not put her on blast. He just says, "Who touched me?" And I love that when she goes to Jesus, she and Jesus low-key have like an inside private conversation that no one else can understand, because everybody around him is saying, well, I mean, everybody's touched you, but Jesus knows exactly who touched him. Friends, be sure that even though you're going through a private situation, be encouraged that even though people may put you on blast, people may throw it on Twitter, people may throw it on Instagram or on Snapchat, Jesus still knows how to keep some things private. Sometimes you just have to have a private conversation with Jesus and you in your prayer closet. Not only does she have a private conversation, but what's even more powerful is, and don't miss this, she has private acceptance. Now, she has an issue with blood, and so Jesus heals her, but the blood would have still stained her clothes. In other words, she would have still been walking around with stained clothes even though she got healed. And here is why you can't let others convince you that you're healed or not healed, because she's still walking around looking like she has an issue, but she's really been healed. And I believe the church would do better not judging people based on how they look and just saying, "God, I pray that your power has been made manifest in their life." Because oftentimes on the outside looking in, we don't really know if they've been healed yet. We're just making an assumption. We're making an assumption based on what we see them going through. We're making an assumption based on what we think their habits are. She has private acceptance. She's still wearing the clothes even though she's been healed. So friends, don't stress. Have a private conversation, have private acceptance. But the number one thing I love from this text is that Jesus lifts her up. Now she's on the ground in reverence and in repentance. I'm sure she's thinking that Jesus is going to go in on her because he says, "Who touched me?" And the disciples are like the goons, you know what I'm saying? They're his squad, they're around him, and they're like, "Who touched the master?" All this stuff. And she's down there and Jesus says, "Listen, go in peace." So he literally lifts her up from her feet and says, "Go with the healing." And I love that while everybody around Jesus was militant, ready to squad up, Jesus was actually ready to dispense grace. And here is why you can't interpret the move of God by people who quote unquote are surrounded by Jesus, because Jesus oftentimes is trying to dispense grace and everybody else is trying to dispense judgment. Remember, keep it a private conversation. Accept the private healing, and remember that God is always ready to dispense grace even though others are ready to dispense judgment. Be blessed.